finally jumping into the long promised Einkorn video for you today. It's actually going to be part 1 of 2 because the reason it's taking me so long to get this to you, even though it has been requested, my apologies that it's taken so long, is that the second part was working with Einkorn and more tips on like getting your sourdough really good and everything. And to be honest, I had great success with Einkorn when I was in Atlanta. And then when we moved to the Colorado Front Range, my Einkorn just did not want to work with me. My Einkorn sourdough, I tried starting it didn't work. I didn't know if it was me, if it was the fresh ground flour, if it was the altitude, what it was. So I had to rewind, go backwards in my bread skills, actually learn skills and not just follow a recipe. And so I've done that and I'm getting better results. And I have a new Einkorn starter that I've restarted. Her name is Ethel. And she is mature, but still getting a little bit more mature. And so I'm still figuring out some of the differences of working with Einkorn in altitude and just in general versus just following a recipe like I used to. So when I have better tips with those, I promise you that the second video is still coming, but I did not want to delay this first part. So before we dive in, let me just take a quick second to say welcome. If you are new here, my name is Amanda Willis. I empower families to wellness authentically through biblically rooted principles. And I'm so glad you're here. Please take a second to subscribe to this channel if you have not done so already. And we're gonna dive right on in. So what is Einkorn, right? This is a question I get asked all the time, especially when I tell people that I work with Einkorn and they think I mean a corn. Which I get, it sounds like that, right? Did anybody else think that when they first heard Einkorn? Do you mean corn? Is this like a popcorn or a different kind of variety? Especially when I first heard about it, because when I very first started using Einkorn was probably in the year 2013, 2012, somewhere in there. So it's been about 10 years that I have worked with Einkorn in some capacity. But honestly, at that point, I just went and grabbed it from the store and I had all-purpose Einkorn flour. Did not understand why the dumplings that I tried to make were so sticky. They did come out, but they were so sticky. And we'll get to that later. But Einkorn is actually a form of wheat. It is the only non-hybridized form of wheat that's out there. And to the best of our knowledge, it is the original wheat. So I'm going to pull my notes up here just so that I don't wander too much, because you guys know I can get very passionate about topics and I can end up on some rants, and I'm going to try very hard not to do that and stick to my notes here, especially since this is going to be part 1 of 2. Give you the highlights, the facts that you're looking for, and then we'll talk the how-to in the next video. All right, so this was actually one of the first foods that was planted at the birth of agriculture over 10,000 years ago, but it grew wild for years before that. So Einkorn was actually a wild wheat. It was not a cultivated wheat to begin with. Like I said, it's the only wheat to never have been hybridized, and it only has 2 sets of chromosomes. So it's also the only wheat that has 2 sets of chromosomes. Most wheats have at least 28 or 36 sets of chromosomes. That means that when you look at it, one, it's just much more complex in general, right? So it's going to have a lot more for your body to deal with when something has higher chromosomes. When it has the fewer chromosomes in it, it's very simple for the body to break down. And you can see, I'm hoping this comes through on the video. If it does not come through and I'm not able to zoom in clearly on the video, I'm going to try really hard to find a digital graphic for you. But this picture right here, this is from the D. Gary Young book, and this has a picture of Einkorn wheat right next to a modern hybridized wheat on your right. And so you can see the difference in the wheat there, how much more complex this is and how much harder that's going to be for the body to break down than this one right here. That's why a lot of people that have issues digesting regular wheat, a lot of them don't have the same issues with einkorn. Many of them find that they can consume einkorn just fine. I find that I do really well with einkorn wheat. We do some ground white and red wheat here. It's not my favorite. I always try to sour leaven it when possible. But as I've been relearning and figuring out einkorn, because hubby and I are foodies, friends, we don't eat healthy food that doesn't taste good. We eat healthy food that also tastes really good. And so when I'm making bread, when I was making my bricks, hubby said, no, stop. So we moved on. But all that to say, I do notice a difference when we are eating einkorn. Okay, back to my notes, because this is why I have them. Take a quick sip first. This is golden turmeric mixed into my sparkling water. If you're wondering what the color of that is. So, like I said, einkorn has 14 chromosomes in it. That's 2 sets of 7 chromosomes. Very simple for the body to break down. If you're looking at that compared to like kamut or durum wheat or spelt, let's talk about that, because a lot of people are like, I've heard these other ancient grains. There's nothing wrong with other ancient grains. There's nothing wrong, I don't think, with consuming them on a regular basis. Some of them are a little easier to work with. If you're first starting to learn to work with ancient grains, maybe using some of these other ones that are a little bit closer to today's modern wheat might be a good stepping stone if you're wanting to get to einkorn. But you can also just jump straight to einkorn. Even these other wheats tend to be a little bit more difficult to break down, but they're still good wheats. Does that make sense? I'm not demonizing any food here, except for maybe if we're talking genetically modified wheats that have been crazy. But genetically modified is different than hybridized, so we're not even going there. All right, stay focused. Here we go. So both kamut and durum wheat are descendants of emmer wheat, okay? They're a natural hybridization of 2 wild grasses that created emmer and into the kamut and durum. And those both, kamut and durum, have 28 chromosomes in them, so double of what einkorn has in it. Now, spelt was the first wheat hybridization that was between cultivated emmer and wild grass, and it creates a species with 42 chromosomes. So spelt has the 42 chromosomes in it. Modern wheat is descended from spelt, and these changes created a shorter plant, stronger gluten, and higher yields. So that's one of the reasons that was done. They wanted stronger gluten so you could get those really, really, really doughy breads very easily and quickly without having to let them rise as long. Whereas the ancient wheats don't have those really strong gluten bonds. They tend to do better with traditional methods of preparation, like sour leavening and sprouting. When it comes to einkorn nutrition, are you ready for this? Compared to modern wheat, einkorn has 30% more protein. Most of us don't think of wheat as being a high protein food. Einkorn has 30% more protein than traditional wheat, 30% less starch than modern wheat, plus B vitamins and trace minerals like iron are occurring in your freshly ground, especially einkorn flour. Now, the gluten that is in einkorn wheat is also different than the gluten we find in our modern wheat today. Not only is it weaker bonds, but it's a different kind of gluten. I'm going to read my notes because I don't always say this correctly. I want to make sure I get it right. Okay, so the DNA of gluten structure in einkorn lacks the high molecular weight proteins that people can't digest. So there you go. It's got those high molecular weight proteins that are harder to digest. In modern wheat are not in the DNA of the gluten structure of einkorn. So technically, it's not that it has less gluten, it's that it has weaker gluten. So it's not that like there's any less of the gluten in there. So the bonds aren't as strong and it's not as heavy of a protein, which means the body's able to break it down a lot better and it doesn't just kind of sit in your stomach. So those are a few of the facts of einkorn wheat itself. I love to fresh grind einkorn when I can. Currently we just have a grain mill attachment to our KitchenAid, which, friends, if you do a lot of baking, it's not ideal. We do a lot of baking, by we I mean me. I do a lot of baking for our house, and I'm grinding wheat multiple times a week. I do have an actual grain mill on my wish list, but I'll tell you, if you need something very affordable to be a stopgap for you in between getting a grain mill and that's stopping you from grinding wheat, is that you don't have one and you don't want to go spend the money on a nice grain mill, then get the grain mill attachment for KitchenAid. You're just going to need to watch the amount of time you have it running, because the motor, I've noticed, depending on the wheat, the motor runs really quickly, or runs really hot really quickly. And so I have to pause it about halfway through, let it cool off for about an hour, and then continue grinding what I was grinding. I will say einkorn grinds a little easier in there than the white wheat that I've got a sourdough going with that too. Her name's Wilma. We have Wilma and Ethel, 2 sourdough starters. I'm just starting this one because I actually wanted to compare. I've never done like a regular wheat sourdough starter. I've always done einkorn. As far as I can remember back, I think it's always been einkorn. It wasn't always fresh ground einkorn, but it was. I had one going for several years in Atlanta. Like I said, it was fantastic. I had no problems with it. My breads turned out great. I didn't have to do much differently, but einkorn does absorb liquid slower than regular wheats and other wheats, I should say, but it also needs less liquid than other wheats do. And I think that's because of the chromosome structure just being less, that it doesn't absorb as much. So you don't need as much liquid working with it. That's why when you're working with certain recipes, it can be very different. And that's why it got really complicated when we moved to the Front Range of Colorado. Suddenly we're at about 5,600 feet elevation, and you're supposed to make adjustments for elevation in your recipe. And I don't know if it's the einkorn that's not falling, or if it's not right, or I'm adjusting the liquid for that and I'm adjusting the liquid for the altitude, and I couldn't figure it out for a while. But I've been working through those, and very soon I will be happy to share with you the update and the things that I have learned in working with einkorn at altitude, as well as having worked with it just at sea level practically. I mean, Atlanta's a little higher than sea level, but nothing elevation wise, But I can tell you, just even taste wise, einkorn has a more complex flavor to it. I wouldn't say it's super earthy like some wheats. When you fresh grind them, they're real heavy, kind of tasting like a red wheat is really bold flavor. Einkorn's not. It's a little almost sweeter, I feel like. Very distinct flavor to it, delicious flavor. I will tell you that when I use it to bake, I have people ask me all the time what my recipes are. I use it in my chocolate chip cookies, friends, and this is just super easy. I went and for years just got the all-purpose jovial einkorn flour from the store, and I just used that in the regular Toll House cookie recipe, okay? The one that has nuts optional, never put the nuts in there, always use Kerrygold butter and the einkorn all-purpose flour, Celtic sea salt, those kind of ingredients. And friends, I cannot tell you the number of people that have asked me for my recipe. I'm like, it's the Nestle Toll House recipe. And then they're like, oh, really? Yes, but the ingredients matter. So the einkorn gives it a little extra richness to it. Like I said, you can get the all-purpose from the store. You're not gonna get the same nutrient benefits that we were just talking about, as the amount of extra protein in there. Obviously, when you have all-purpose, it's a little more starchy and a little less protein, and you're missing a lot of the vitamins and stuff because you've taken the germ apart from it, right? So if you can get the whole wheat, it's fantastic. But if you can get einkorn berries, grind your own einkorn berries. They are fantastic. I will say, in the current market, the price is going up from my experience looking around on einkorn. My absolute favorite place to order einkorn berries from is actually from Young Living Essential Oils. They usually have 5-pound bags of einkorn berries, and you can get 3 of those in a pack. And when you have that on like loyalty rewards and you earn points back, it's hands down the best pricing I've found on them. They're also all like organic methods that are used. Everything's still seed to seal standard, just like all of Young Living's products are. However, they've been out of stock for over a year. I want to say 2 years maybe. They're supposed to be coming back. They've had some manufacturing delays with them. And the last time I tried to get einkorn from Azure Standard, they've been out of stock for a couple months too. So I'm not sure when that's coming back in. I know between some like natural disasters, intense climates in the Pacific Northwest where some things were being grown last year, and then just some transport for when you get einkorn that's grown like in France and that sort of thing, that there's just delays, right? There's delays everywhere kind of with everything right now. So my favorite source, number one, would be Young Living. For the einkorn berries, they also have einkorn flour. I think the flour has been in stock, but I'm trying to grind my berries. So if you're looking for just the flour, I think that has been in stock. I know some of like the spaghettis, the pasta noodles and things like that. The pancake waffle mix that Young Living has, I think all of those have been in stock. I'm not a big mix person, so I haven't been ordering those. However, I think you can get those from there. Otherwise, Azure Standards might go to after Young Living. That's my next step. And if I can't get them from Azure, then I'm looking for Jovial Foods in the store. I believe you can even typically order Jovial on their website and get the berries. But like I said, when I price compared before, Young Living was the best price, which made me happy because that simplified a lot of things. Just pop it onto our subscription box with everything else that we get from Young Living. Yay! I love when things are simple like that. So what einkorn questions do you guys have? Pop them in the comments for me below. Let me know specifically for part 2, what questions do you have when working with einkorn? I know that we had some questions before. I've got those written down, but if you have new questions, if this is the first einkorn video you've watched, really it's the first einkorn video I've done. I've just talked about einkorn on unboxing videos before. So I would love to find the answer to your question. If I don't know the answer to your question, or if it was something I just forgot to include in today's video, I'd be happy to answer that as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and for stopping by my channel. Until next time, take care, friends. Cheers.